Welcome back, everybody. I feel like it's been way too long. It's over a month since our last pay-per-view event, and therefore over a month since my last video. So thank you, everybody, as always, for joining. Today we're going to be doing some analysis and predictions for UFC 236 coming up this Saturday, April 13th, out of Atlanta, Georgia. Two main events: Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum, and of course Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier. So going to be doing things a little bit differently for this time around. What I want to do is go through, the fighters, the Vegas odds, and then go over a few main categories and give you my thoughts on those. So the first category is physical attributes. Second category is striking. Third category is the ground game, and the fourth category is the mental aspect, or the mental approach to these fights. So let's jump right into it. Our first fight of the night, coming out of the light heavyweight division, OSP, Ovin St. Preux versus Nikita the Miner Krylov. Vegas odds for this fight, it's a pick'em. Both fighters are minus 115. OSP is 36 years old, 23-12. Krylov, 27 years old, 24-6. So the physical attributes. Both fighters are 6'3". OSP is like 6'3 3/4", slight height advantage, but he's got a 2.5-inch reach advantage. Striking, this is a toss-up. So Krylov is definitely the better technical striker in this fight. He's got a background. He started training karate when he was like 10 years old, and he's just better technically, and he mixes it up better. OSP does throw kicks, but not like Krylov. Krylov, good hands, good feet, mixes it up well. OSP, though, has way more power. Krylov, I think, can outstrike OSP in this fight, but OSP I feel like he'll always be a danger to Krylov from the standpoint of inflicting more significant damage. So I think striking is kind of a toss-up in this one. The ground game. This might surprise some of you guys who know about Nikita Krylov, but I'm giving the slight edge to OSP on the ground game. And I say that because Krylov is a master of sports in submission fighting. Out of his 24 wins in MMA, 14 of them have come by way of submission. So 60% of his fights, or his wins, end via submission. But he also gets submitted a lot. He has 6 losses on his record. 5 of those have come by way of submission. One of those was to OSP. So, OSP, he's one of the guys who submitted him previously, but on top of that, he's a legit brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Also, out of OSP's last 4 victories, 3 of them have come by way of submission. So, as good as Krylov is on the ground for being a big guy, I think regarding this fight, I'm giving the advantage to OSP. So, mentality, like the mental approach to this fight, I got to give the mental edge to Krylov. So, OSP, he's 36 years old. He's lost 2 out of his last 3 fights. Both these fighters are coming off losses. Krylov is as well. But prior to that, he won 4 fights in a row. Now, granted, those fights were actually outside of the UFC organization. He was with FNG. Krylov fought for the UFC, went and fought for FNG, and now he's back in the UFC. He lost his UFC debut. So, Krylov, he's also 27 years old. He's entering his prime, whereas I said OSP's 36. Krylov is also out for revenge, and I like that in fighters. I think that it gives them that much more drive and motivation in their camps when they're out to get revenge, to train that much harder and be that much more dedicated to the fight. So I'm giving the mental advantage to Krylov. This prediction might surprise some people too, but I got to go with my gut. I got to go on my instincts. I'm going to go OSP via submission. Our second fight of the night, coming out of the welterweight division, Jouban versus Dwight Grant. This is essentially a pick'em. Again, Jouban's minus 120, Grant's minus 110. But do not bet on this fight. And I'll tell you why here in a second. So Jouban, he's 36 years old, 19-6. He's fighting out of LA. Grant, he's 34 years old, 9-2, part of the American Kickboxing Academy. So physical attributes, Grant has a 1-inch height and a 4-inch reach advantage. Striking, so Grant got a late start on his MMA training like Jouban, but he's got 9 wins in his career. 7 of them have come by knockout, so the dude's kind of a knockout artist, including his last win, which was via first round knockout pretty impressively. He does not have great technique. I'll say he doesn't even really have good technique. He'll keep his hands up. He won't drop them real low, but he swings with real long, wide, open punches. But he swings fast and he swings hard. So, again, not great technique, but a great, powerful, fast striker. Jouban, he didn't start training Muay Thai until he was 23 years old, but in his amateur career, he put together an undefeated amateur career before training MMA. Out of his 16 wins, 11 of them have come by knockout, including a second-round knockout over Ben Saunders in his last performance. So he's certainly, I'd say, a more technical striker than Grant. He's just more crisp. I think he has better defense. I think he mixes it up better. He's also fast and he's also powerful, though. I don't think quite to the level of Grant, but you know, Jouban is fast, powerful, and has great technique. And for those reasons, I've got to give the edge in striking to Jouban, but I feel like there's an edge or an advantage in who I think would inflict more damage or have the potential to end this by knockout. I think that goes to Grant. So the ground game, Jouban clearly has a better ground game here. Grant is almost undeveloped on the ground. We never see him on the ground, and so it's kind of hard to say what sort of skills he possesses. But you know, Jouban is a brown belt out of 10th Planet Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Out of his 16 fights, though, Jouban, or his 16 wins, none of them have come by way of submission. So he's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but never seems to utilize it. This fight is going to be decided, I think, on the feet. So the mentality, the mental aspect or approach to this fight, Jouban had a lot of promise early on in his career, but he seemed to get outclassed by the elite fighters in the UFC. He's coming off of a win, but he lost 2 in a row prior to that. And so he's also up against a really dangerous guy, and I think that scares a lot of people. Whereas Grant, you know, he's won 8 out of his last 9 fights. He's knocked 7 of his 9 opponents out. Younger, he's not a young fighter, he's 34, but the younger fighter, I think a little bit more promise and determination to reach the top than Jouban. I don't want to take that away from Jouban, but he's 36 and he's been losing some fights lately, so I got to give the mental advantage to Grant here. So my prediction for this fight, like I said, do not bet this fight. That's my recommendation. I have no idea how this fight is going to end. I can see Grant winning by first round knockout inside of a minute. I can see Jouban completely outclassing Grant. I could maybe see Jouban taking this down to the ground and utilizing some of his jiu-jitsu. I don't know how this fight is going to end. I'm just going to wing it right here based off of a gut feeling. I think Grant lands a big right hook and flatlines Jouban in the second round. Third fight of the night, light heavyweight division. Eryk, ya boy, Anders versus Khalil, the Warhorse Roundtree. So Vegas odds for this fight. Anders is a -190 favorite. Roundtree +165. Anders, 31 years old, 11-3. Roundtree, 29 years old, 7-3. Physical attributes for this fight. Both fighters are 6'1". Roundtree's got a slight reach advantage. Striking. Anders, a southpaw. I think every punch he's ever thrown in the UFC has been a left hand. So he doesn't have great technique, but he packs a lot of power with that left hand. Out of his 11 wins, 7 of them have come by knockout. Roundtree doesn't have terrific technique either, but he honestly is one of the best athletes in the division. Out of his 7 wins, 5 of them have come by knockout. And I think he mixes it up a little bit better too, mixing in more kicks. I think he's a better counter puncher than Anders is. I think that Khalil Roundtree has, not definitively, but he's got the striking advantage in this fight. So the ground game. Khalil Roundtree has a pretty poor ground game, to be honest. And Eryk Anders is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he likes to utilize it when he can. So I give the edge to Eryk Anders in the ground game. And the mental approach to this fight. I wouldn't say that either of these fighters have a mental advantage over the other. Eryk Anders, after starting his career 10-0, he's lost 3 out of his last 4 fights. It's kind of do or die for him. And I don't know how many more fights he has on his UFC contract, but you can't lose 4 out of 5. So this is a must win for Eryk Anders. Roundtree's coming off of a brutal knockout to Johnny Walker. He took a couple of short, sharp elbows and was just out cold back in November of last year, something like that. And that messes with you. So I can't really give either one of these fighters the mental edge over the other. I think that that's a wash. My prediction for the fight, though, I like the underdog in this fight. I'm kind of shocked that Eryk Anders is almost a 2-1 favorite in this fight. I don't really know what he's done to deserve that. I'm picking the underdog here. I think Khalil Roundtree has a clear striking advantage on the feet, and although he has a poor ground game, I don't think Eryk Anders is going to exploit it. So for those reasons, give me Khalil Roundtree by split decision. That's it for this video, guys. This is just part 1 out of a 2-part series for UFC 236. In my second video, I'm going to be covering the co-main event, Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum, and the main event, Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier. So please like and subscribe if you liked the content on this video, and be sure to check out part 2 for those 2 fights.